Hey guys, thanks for joining this session. My name is Andy Parsons, Cloud Solution Architect based in Melbourne, Australia. A little bit about me, been in the industry about 20 years, focusing in IT systems engineering. Previous experience prior to joining Pure was as a data center architect at Facebook, managing global IT infrastructure. And today I focus on helping customers with Kubernetes containers and DevOps type solutions here in the region. If you remember our last session, I went over multi-cluster management using Rancher and Portworx. How we can deploy stateful applications to any Rancher cluster um, and have a single pane of glass to manage those applications. And I want to follow that up with a demonstration today of using Rancher Server to deploy an application, a stateful application, into a Rancher cluster. I'm also going to show you our asynchronous DR, which is our set it and forget it application migration tool that allows automatic replication of objects for failover of stateful applications to any cluster. Could be on-prem, could be to the cloud, um, anytime you're using Portworx as your storage platform underneath your Kubernetes. So let's paint the picture. Let's go into the demo landscape. So what I've built is a Rancher server running Server 2.6, which is the latest software. We're going to leverage a tool called continuous delivery, which is Rancher's tool for delivering applications into Kubernetes. And I've built two Rancher servers, or clusters, excuse me. I've built a production cluster called PX Storage 02. This is running Portworx. And I've built a DR cluster called PX Storage 03, also running Portworx. I've additionally created an asynchronous DR cluster pair. So I've set up disaster recovery replication, which is policy based. And what we'll do today is we're going to take an application from GitHub. We'll pull it into the continuous delivery platform. In this case, it's going to be WordPress. We will deploy that application into the production cluster. So it's going to create some objects. It's going to create some persistent volumes, some data, a couple secrets. And that application will be deployed into a namespace that's already set up for disaster recovery. So once Kubernetes sees that, and once Portworx sees that, it's going to say, oh, I need to replicate these objects automatically over to that secondary site. So we should see a like for like volumes, services, deployments, anything that's in that namespace, we should see those application objects automatically replicated. Now, once that application is deployed, I'll actually scale down or initiate a failover. So I'll suspend application replication and I'll scale up the application on the secondary site. And you'll see that application will be replicated in its entirety with all of the objects intact. So let's get into it. So here we've got a Rancher server. If we actually go to the home screen, you can see Rancher. I've got a view of all of my objects, like my clusters, continuous delivery, cluster management. From here, I can create applications. I can create new clusters. I can scale those clusters. I can manage user authentication. I can manage multi-factor, so I could turn on Okta or Active Directory, and really neat UI to be able to manage all of this under a single umbrella. Now for this demonstration, we're actually going to go to continuous delivery. And we're going to create a new application to deploy. And what we'll do is we'll actually go over to our public GitHub repo, and we're going to pull an application called WordPress PXDR. And it's just an application that's got a WordPress front end, a SQL backend, and it's going to create some volumes and a secret and some services, and it'll create a WordPress application. So what we'll do is we'll copy that code or a link to that code, that repo. We'll go back to our tool. We'll give it a name. We'll call it WordPress with DR. And I'll copy that repo, that URL. I'm going to go ahead and put this in the main branch. We'll go down here and we'll say we want to deploy this to PX Storage 02. And we want to put it in the MGN namespace. And that's it. We'll go ahead and hit create. Now, before I do that, I just want to show you, so this is a cluster that has no objects in it already. It's got no volumes, it's got no volume claims. It's got no workload, at least other than the Rancher and Portworx workload. So there's no other applications in any namespaces. But it does have storage already set up. So I've got Portworx running. I've got some storage classes. These are the stock standard Portworx storage classes that come with Portworx. So I've got some replicated storage classes. I've got some snapshot ones, some DB ones, just used for different tuning and different performance profiles or characteristics of running different types of workloads. We're actually going to use two different ones today. We're going to use PXDB and we're going to use PX replicated to deploy this application. So two different storage classes, both going to be supported by Portworx. And if I go into my secondary cluster, you can see I don't have any workloads. So there's nothing running in here yet other than Rancher, and then I've got my Portworx cluster as well. So I've got Stork and I've got Portworx. And you can see same thing, I've got storage, I've got volume claims, I've got persistent volumes. This is, I think, leftover from something else that I created. Yeah, it looks like it's pretty old. But the same experience. Now, these clusters could be on-prem. This could be in any cloud. You know, with one of the neat things that with Portworx, you know, we can actually go into cluster management, and we could go, or excuse me, with Rancher, you know, I could create a new cluster, and it could be any one of these tools that's going to load up on the screen. EKS, AKS, Google, lots of different options here. Now, because Portworx is a deployment inside Kubernetes, it functions the same in any one of these platforms. So your application, being able to deploy this application across any one of these with Portworx is a matter of just pulling this Git repo and just deploying it. I don't need to alter it in any way because it's going to consume storage in the same fashion. So every one of these clusters, it's going to look at storage the same way. It's going to look for this storage class that's presented by Portworx, which is all managed inside Kubernetes. So let's go ahead and create this application. Just double check all of our variables. We'll hit create. And hopefully this will go through with no errors. It doesn't like the branch. Let's try that one more time. We'll hit delete. Just go back in. WordPress with, might have timed out, DR. Main. We'll put it in px storage 02. We'll go mgn, and let's hit create. All right, now if we go ahead and click in here, we should see a whole bunch of objects start creating in just a moment. All right, and there we go. We've got some deployments, some services, some volume claims, a secret. Now all of these objects, we're going to start seeing these populate up on this cluster. So if we go into px storage 02 and we go to workload, go to workload, we should see them if we scroll down. All right, so we can see the namespace MGN. We've got a WordPress and a WordPress SQL deployment. And you can see in the events that all of these objects have been created. So it's created all of those objects. And now this application is actually up and running. We can go into storage. You can see that now I've got two persistent volumes. And those are going to be bound to persistent volume, or volume claims that are bound to persistent volumes. Now to expand this a bit further, remember I said earlier that we can manage all of this from a single pane of glass. So like I said, Portworx is deployed into this Rancher cluster, and these are objects inside Kubernetes. So I can actually go down to all the resources and look at those storage objects that are going to replicate. So you remember in the slide I said Portworx is using a cluster pair, and we're using Stork, which is an open source storage operator for Kubernetes, to pair these two clusters. This is what's going to handle the data replication and management between these clusters. And this lives in all Portworx clusters, whether it's in the cloud, whether it's on-prem. We're going to have like for like. So we can go into Stork, and you can see that I've got some scheduled policies, I've got some cluster pairs, I've got a namespace policy. And if we drill down into that, we can see that I've got a namespace policy called MGM, which is the name of my namespace. So I'm being a little generic here. You can see I've got a 1 minute interval. So every minute it's going to replicate all of the objects into that application. And it's going to replicate anything that's in the MGM namespace. So what's neat about this is if I wanted to, I could edit this and add namespaces. I could say, oh, I want to add maybe a new namespace called banking applications. And when I applied that, it would automatically start replicating in that interval everything in that banking applications namespace. Now, if we go back in here, what we should see under cluster is we should start seeing objects replicating. Remember I said we've got a 1-minute replication schedule. So migration schedule has started, and we can start seeing objects being replicated over. Now, if I go to that secondary cluster, I should go in storage, and we should start seeing those persistent volume claims. We should see the workload. Now, these are actually in a scaled down state, right? So if I were to go in here, and I've actually opened up a Kubernetes shell for both of these clusters. Now, if I do a kubectl get deployments.apps -n-mgn, you'll see that I've got these apps running in a ready scaled down state. So they're not up and running. It's not actually, the application's not actually up and running. If I do a get PVC, you'll see the volume is there as well. Right, so I've automatically replicated that volume. Now, what's different about it? There shouldn't be anything different about this volume. Now, if you look at the volume, I've got the name, I've got the status it's bound, and I've got the volume's ID. Now, if I were to look at that, look at that last 3 digits, 78B. Let's actually go over to the primary cluster, do the same thing. So we'll do a kubectl get PVC -n mgn. Should see a name ending in 78B. So again, it's replicated everything exactly as it was in the primary cluster. In this cluster, the application is actually scaled up. So if we do a deployment.apps, we'll see the app's actually up and running. Get deployments.apps. Now, this is an application that's replicating at a 1-minute interval. Let's say this site went down and I needed to be able to scale up the application onto my secondary site. How do I do that? How easy is it? Well, let's simulate that failure. So what I'm going to do first is I'm just going to scale down the migration, or I'm going to stop migrations of the application. So I'm going to say no more application replication. So let's pause it. So to do that, we'll use Stork. And we're just going to suspend migrations of the application using that cluster pair in that namespace. All right, so that's paused it. So no more replication should be occurring. Now I can take this a step further and I can scale this application up. Now remember I said this application is in this ready 0 state. So it's not actually serving any workload or any IO at this point. It's just got all of the objects there so that we can do that. Now, how easy is it to scale this application up? Well, what we'll do is we'll also leverage Stork to activate a migration and say, hey, I'm ready to use this application on this cluster. So to do that, we'll just run this command, Stork activate migrations. And what we should see is this application scaled from a 0 to a 1 state. Now, this is going to take that data and those pods and connect them and glue them all together in the same state that it was on that primary site. And if I were to do a deployment.apps, you can see that this application is in a ready 1 state. Now to review, I've shown you a lot of really neat things here. I've shown you that you can deploy stateful applications across any Kubernetes cluster from a single pane of glass. I've shown you that you can manage those objects from that pane of glass. And I've shown you that you can fail an application over from one cluster to another cluster, be it on-prem or in any cloud, with a single pane of glass. I hope you found this video helpful. Thanks for watching and have a great day.